Guys, how are you? Back with another episode of the HYPEWORKS podcast. This is episode number 23. We've got myself, Jake, and Steven from dub.co. Hi, guys. How are you?
Good to be here.
Cool.
Great.
I like how Jake's dressed the part today. He did warn that he was going to dress the part, so I'm glad he followed through.
I feel very underdressed right now.
Yeah.
But I'm repping
No, it's good.
though, so I'm pretty proud about that.
Yes, Cal.com. We just switched over to this Google scheduling booking thing, and so far so good. But I would consider Cal.com if the Google thing falls apart. It's been quite buggy though, right, Jake?
Probably will in like a couple of months. I mean, a couple of years. You know how Google does with their products. I don't know if like you've seen
Right.
reputation for that, but
Yeah, and I saw some guy did like a fake screenshot of Google Calendar shutting down, and I
yep,
was like, oh shit! Like we just
that's
just
hilarious.
got the booking page set up. So cool. Yeah, Stephen, great to have you on. Just to kind of give a kind of bit of a backdrop on yourself, just kind of high level, like you just finished up product of the week and product of the month on Product Hunt for your startup dub.co. We'll talk about dub.co like kind of in a lot of depth, but kind of just give us a little bit of overview of kind of what dub.co does.
Sure, sounds good. So Dub.co is a link management infrastructure platform that allows you to build anything from short links to QR codes, all the way to referral links, affiliate links, and even like link sharing features inside your SaaS application. And it started as a side project, funnily enough, back when I was still working full time at Vercel. I had a need to basically share links with really nice OG images, like the Open Graph preview images. When, for example, if you're sharing a link to a third-party site that don't have really good images, you want to overlay your own. So it basically came out of that need. Launched it on Hacker News. Right from the start, it was open source. It got a ton of traction. And over time, I just started building more and more features and grew it beyond that initial use case. And yeah, that's eventually I started talking to more of our users. I realized that there's a massive business opportunity behind just short links. You can think about the affiliate marketing space. It's a massive $16 billion industry that is ripe for disruption because a lot of the players there are like really legacy, old school, really terrible UX, and that sort of led to me back in December. I started a company around Dub. I basically went full time on it, and here we are.
Yeah, cool. It sounds so easy, compressed like that. Cool. Yeah. If you don't mind, we'll just go back a little bit. I know you did mention your corporate gigs, and we'll get into that. But like, where did you grow up? Like, what was your kind of like interests like when you were growing up? And talk a bit about that.
Sounds good. Yeah, we can definitely wind back time a little bit. So I grew up in Malaysia. It's this country that's right below where Jake's at in Thailand.
Yeah.
So funnily enough, I've never been to Thailand, which is kind of crazy if you think about it, since we share a border. I really want to go there someday. I've heard great things. Anyways, going back to me. I grew up in Malaysia up until 19. And then right after that, I basically went to the US for college. And I think I have a really good story to answer your question there a little bit. So sort of my entrepreneurial spirit came from this little side gig that I did when I was in high school in Malaysia. I actually wrote a science fiction novel. It's a book called Someone's in My Head. You probably can find it on Amazon. I don't think there's any copies left, but I basically wrote that book. It's like like I think 100,000 words. I wrote it over a year, and then took another year to edit it. And I started to like sell it and market it to friends and family. People in my school, we had like 3,000 people, so it was great. And then I started talking to local bookstores. Eventually managed to get it featured at the largest like national bookstore in Malaysia. It's called Popular Bookstores. So that was great. So that was sort of like my first foray into entrepreneurship. And I sort of understood the value of generating revenue when you're sleeping, and also the sort of hard efforts when it comes to marketing and I was doing a lot of guerrilla marketing at the time, but yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Were you into like Ryan Holiday, these guys? I read these kind of books.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
these like fiction, thriller, science fiction sort of books, and that's why it sort of inspired me to write something in that realm. Yeah, there's a lot of great learning experience, I would say.
And were you tempted to go back to Malaysia, or were you kind of like you were set in the US at that time?
At that time, I was definitely very much wanting to go abroad to just broaden my horizons because like Malaysia was great. I think there's a lot of opportunity for growth, especially since I think we're ranked as one of the fastest growing, like I'm not sure if it's third world or like developing countries out of that list. We're
Mm-hmm.
like one of the fastest growing, which is really cool. But at the end of the day, I really wanted to start, like, I really wanted to go into technology. And I think when it comes to software, especially, the US is still like the frontier when it comes being able to be in Silicon Valley and that kind of stuff. So that's sort of what drew me into starting my university and early career in the States. So,
Yeah, I think if you're doing hardware, Asia, like Asia's the place to be, but software
yeah,
definitely US.
100%. Yeah, my
Yeah.
dad actually works at a hardware manufacturer. Yeah,
Ah,
it's a
cool.
big like it's a big yeah, it's a big thing in Asia, which is crazy.
Yeah, cool. And then basically, you grad, and then you got into the software business. I don't want to fast forward too much to like Vercel, but like, where were you looking at in terms of like which field and like what was your kind of main interest at that time?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I went through multiple fields, I would say. I started like my first sort of tech industry was, funnily enough, it was crypto back in 2017. It was like when that first like Bitcoin spike happened. We were me and a couple of friends, we were in Tokyo building this blockchain startup. Um, and that sort of like was my first like proper like startup experience, I would say. At the time, I wasn't like very technically savvy, so it was a little hard for me to like properly go in there and be fully hands-on with the product. So I learned the hard way that you really need to know how to code to be able to build a tech startup. Um, so a few months, actually a year after that, I went into education tech, uh, and I did like an internship at this company in New York called Noodle Partners. That was a really great experience. Learned a ton. Still didn't get a lot of technical hands-on experience. So and it wasn't until in the summer of 2020, I was like when COVID hit, I believe that was when I was like sort of stuck at home and I was like, okay, I gotta teach myself how to code. Like enough is enough. I cannot just keep designing stuff in like Sketch or Figma. So I basically taught myself HTML, CSS, and jQuery, like basically everything from scratch. And I built this tool called One Word Domains. It's this platform that gives you all available one word domain names for various different CLDs like .ai, .co, and that blew up on Product Hunt like the week when I launched it, and the sort of response that I got from it, as well as a week later we launched the Hacker News and also got to the front page. That was when I was like fully understanding the value of putting something out there that you build from scratch and getting people's feedback on it. So yeah, that was like my first proper, I would say, like technical product I've built. And then fast forward a few years later, that's when I got to Vercel. So that's basically the path that led me there.
Yeah, and why did you pick Vercel? I mean, Vercel now is like so big in terms of the developer community, but
Mhm.
of course, then it probably, it was probably funded, but it was basically largely unknown, like at that point. So, um, did you have an inkling it was going to blow up, or did you just what was
Yeah,
the feeling there?
yeah, that's a good question. I would say at the time I was when I was contemplating joining Vercel. At the time, I was still working on Warmer Domains, which is that product I built, and then I was thinking of turning into like a venture-backed business. I was like looking to raise capital on it. I eventually got to like a very small like pre-seed round. And along the same time, I was actually already in conversations with the founder of Vercel, Guillermo. I actually reached out to them and I was like, would you guys like to partner on the domains product? We could give you an API and you could, surface domains, really cool domains to your users. And that was sort of like the start of the conversation. And when he got news that, I was going to start my own company around this project, he was like, why don't you join us instead to start your career here, get to know about open source, about B2B sales, And at the time, I was like, I was using a lot of Heroku. Experience was pretty trash. Like it was, I wouldn't say trash. It was just not very ideal. There were a lot of like gotchas and pitfalls that I would run into. And Vercel felt like a breath of fresh air. And at the time, I think they were at like Series A or B, I believe. So it was relatively big, but as you said, not as big as today. So I was like, okay, this is a fantastic opportunity for me to kickstart my
Yeah.
career. And I wasn't as like I didn't have as much conviction on the startup I was building. I was kind of I didn't see the massive TAM that all these venture backed businesses would require. So I decided to take a leap of faith and jump into Vercel, and I think it worked out pretty well.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it, how like people follow people. Like when you meet someone that really impresses you, like mentors, like Jake, you talk a lot about mentors as well. Like when you see someone you respect and you're excited about, that matters more than the actual company or the products, right? Because there's something about it that kind of gets you in.
Oh yeah,
Um,
100%. Jake, do you want
and
to say something?
you felt that with Guillermo, right? You felt like this guy is going to be like, really,
100%. Yeah, there's
he's
this
going to
term
kill
that
it.
I came up recently. It's called founder market fit or like founder led sales. Like these two terms, I would say. Like there's this in the past you could build businesses that's like fully anonymous, like no one knows who the founding team is, and like it grows. But nowadays people really value trust and being able to put a face to a company. And that's what Guillermo does
Yeah.
to Vercel, and that's what I'm trying to do with Dub. It's very incredibly valuable when it comes to both the brand value and also how much people are willing to put their trust in your company and adopt it into our own company. So I think that's also one of the main reasons that drew me to to basically join Vercel, because it was like Guillermo was such a like influential figure in the web development space, and I was also trying to become a better web developer, and I was like, yeah, this was sort of like the direction and the mentor that I wanted to have. So yeah, I completely agree with what you said.
Yeah, I think it's one of the weaknesses of business in this part of the world in Asia. Like people tend to be really shy. Like the CEOs and founders, they don't really want to have their photo on the company website. Even it's kind of wild.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, and you were there for a while. Like you learn a lot there. And I guess it's a similar problem to myself and Jake had. Like as well, when you're in corporate, like there's that you kind of think, okay, where am I going here? Like, am I gonna try and like become part of the leadership team, or am I gonna step away? It's a very hard sort of decision to make, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. For me, it was definitely one of the hardest decisions I've had to make to decide if I were to leave and do my own company full time. Uh, because like Vercel is a fantastic company for not just like people love them on Twitter, but also at the same time it's like there's a lot of um, it's while it's big, like when I joined it was like 80 people and it grew to like 400 plus in a matter of like a year. So it was a pretty crazy like hyper growth phase. Even though it was big, I still had a lot of autonomy as to what I was doing, and I could like basically take a project end to end. And one of the projects that I worked on was this project called the Platform Starter Kit, just like a way for people to build multi-tenant products. Like if you're building like a website builder, and you can offer custom domains, and that's sort of like what we empowered. So I had a lot of like autonomy in that space, and it was a lot of fun. I got to learn from one of some of the like smartest engineers I've ever met. So, but at the end of the day, I sort of like realized that my heart lies in entrepreneurship and building my own business. That's sort of like what I had to put on hold when I joined Vercel. So I sort of reminded myself of that, and that if I didn't leave today, I probably wouldn't do it for a very long time. So I was like, I just had to rip the band-aid off and go all in.
It never leaves you, right? That kind of desire to like start something never leaves you. Um, so you're better to kind of listen to that than suppress it,
100%. Yeah, yeah. I was already doing nights and weekends, and I realized it wasn't sustainable to just keep working, like burning both ends of the candle. So I
Yeah.
really needed to like choose one. So I decided to choose my own company. Just yeah.
Yeah, and obviously
So,
Dab.
fast
Sorry,
forward,
go on,
the,
Jake.
the product has been made. I have a few questions here because, you know,
Sure.
who are the main sort of personas of the people that are going to use this product that you're launching?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's something that we we've been working on narrowing down, and what we ultimately came up with is growth marketers and people that are working at these large companies, not necessarily large companies, could be startups too, but marketers and marketing leaders that are trying to understand attribution. Like, how do you attribute your marketing spend to the results that's being driven? For example, if you were to make a tweet on Twitter, how do you know that tweet actually converted to a sale? So that's sort of like the path that we're trying to bridge the gap on. Because usually, if you were to post, just a link to your blog post or whatever, it's hard for you to determine, like, oh, was it this tweet, was it this LinkedIn post that converted to the user? Like, which platforms, social platforms, are actually higher ROI when it comes to maybe running ads? So that's sort of, I know I took a little detour there, but to answer your question, Jake, it's definitely marketing leaders that are trying to optimize ad spend and understand where their marketing spend and dollars are best converted to paying users.
And just to dig a bit deeper there, okay, I really want to understand the position. So between Bitly and Google Analytics, where does your product lie?
It basically replaces both in a way, if you think about it. So essentially, we take a short link solution and we combine it with the end of like the entire funnel, where you go through that whole, like, I forgot the full set of terms. It was like customer acquisition, activation, and then like conversion to a paying user. We want to be able to bridge that entire funnel and show you that conversions. So essentially, you wouldn't need to rely on Google Analytics anymore in the future. You will basically utilize our SDK, which is fully first-party cookie. There's no like privacy issues, and maybe an integration with Stripe if that's what you use, to fully understand like where and when does the user actually convert. And that's why we're excited about the affiliate space, because this is essentially it's multi-channel, right? You don't necessarily have to be Twitter. It could be an influencer campaign on TikTok. So there's these different channels that you can basically use. Yeah.
Within the product, there's an affiliate marketing software as well, so that you can not just do like Bitly tracking or Google Analytics, but also you can drive campaigns through referral and affiliates.
Exactly. That's the vision that we have. The campaigns product, we're still building that out yet. So right now we're fully, like, our entire product, the link product is already out there. We're working on a campaigns product and talking to a few users and sort of getting that initial feedback at the moment. So yeah, that's a vision we have.
Okay, cool. And Product Hunt, okay, I have my own little product going on of my own, and I've been assessing Product Hunt, and I'm not entirely sure the value, but since you're a bit of a veteran of that scene, do you think that this is a good way forward for product marketers?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. I think Product Hunt. So I have definitely, like, we recently, anyway, yesterday we published an article on our Product Hunt launch, and in there I go very in depth into like the pros and cons of Product Hunt. Actually, mostly the pros, but I basically went through like why you should do it, and as well as the step-by-step stuff that we went through. You can find a link. It's very simple. It's d.to/playbook. But basically, to answer your question, Product Hunt is definitely incredibly valuable, especially when you have a nascent product that doesn't have really good like domain authority. And if you want good SEO, Product Hunt is a very strong backlink. It's like 91 domain rating. That's one. That's the first advantage. And second, they have like 4.5 million monthly visitors. So every time your product gets on the front page, you'll for sure get a lot of like visibility and conversion to paying users. And it's not just that day itself, your launch day, the days following, Product Hunt will have like multiple email campaigns and also featuring them on different blog posts to make sure that your product keeps getting like ROI over the next couple of weeks to 2 months. So
yeah, I read that post. Super interesting. Really good detail as well.
Thank you.
We'll put a link down in the description so other people can read it. It's good.
I'm asking for my own personal gains here, but when you use Product Hunt, are you buying like media campaigns from them? I know that they offer a series of tailored solutions of all different sizes. You don't have to reveal how much you spend, but are you doing paid campaigns, or is it completely organic?
It's completely organic. It's so the sort of there are two options, right? If you want to pay to win, there are like people that offer you both a little sus. I'll admit. We got a lot of messages ever since like we said that we're going to launch on Product Hunt. So that's one way I don't really recommend it. And there's also the Product Hunt like sort of paid advertising. Not sure if that ties back to like your actual app votes. I'm not sure if that's a correlation there, but you definitely get a bunch of eyes on people, like people viewing Product Hunt will see that. For us, it was completely organic. Like the way we did it was like, it was fully through building an audience early on. So we've been building this product for over a year now, and we had right now over like 15,000 GitHub stars, which basically translate to a massive like open source community. That when we were launching a product hunt, we basically leveraged my audience on Twitter as well as our GitHub open source community, and was able to get a lot of people to support it, which I'm incredibly grateful for. And I think that sort of drew the initial traction to get us to the top, and then sort of allowed us to stay there over the course of the launch day. So, yeah.
Yeah, I followed it on Twitter, Jake, and I have to say, like Steven, he did a great job. Like not just the frequency of the posts, but the quality of the assets. Like they posted some really high quality assets. I think that helped with engagement, right?
That's super important. Yeah, I agree. It's 100% like people care about first impressions, and we were fortunate enough to work with like a designer that was able to help with those assets, and that I think definitely drove a lot of conversions, and people really liking what they saw. So yeah, 100%. You really need good design assets, and I think I wrote about that in the post as well. So it's part of I think step 3, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah.
Yeah, there's a big debate right now, I think, with Product Hunt, right? A lot of people kind of say it's like it's slightly kind of past its sell by date, and it favors venture like funded companies, so like people doing media buy, like Jake mentioned. Do you think that's fair, or like obviously
I
you've had a
don't.
lot of success, but
Yeah, I've heard that. I mean, I've heard rumors. I'm not sure if it's confirmed that product is becoming more pay to play. Like you have to like work with like a third party that does your launch for you and can get you a bunch of uploads. Um, I'm not 100% like sure if that's true or not. And another thing is like going what you mentioned about venture back versus solo, like bootstrap, whatever. I don't think that's a difference there. I do think that bootstrap businesses might even have a bigger chance of getting to the front page simply because of the nature of bootstrap businesses and people that are very like these bootstrap companies and founders are very scrappy and can find ways to basically either they have an audience on Twitter or they have a massive like newsletter, like 15,000 people that it can leverage. So they are like surprisingly because like nowadays like product hunt is it. I think they added that recently where they show if the company is bootstrapped or venture backed, and I think people generally gravitate to it supporting bootstrap businesses. It's like the David versus Goliath debate. So I think bootstrap businesses do have an edge there. For us, when we launched, we basically had the bootstrap tag, so that was sort of a really cool thing to have, and not sure if that drove people to supporting us, but
I mean, yeah, I mean, there's an argument they should stop like big companies, especially public companies, even participating, right? Like if you're Slack or something like that, and you're posting like on Product Hunt, don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. I think I don't know. It really comes down to how cool your product is, and I think like companies like Notion and OpenAI could probably pull that off because they do have massive community and they do launch really cool products like Notion AI, like ChatGPT, and that kind of stuff. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Like if Slack were to launch like a new feature, I doubt it would do well, to be honest. So yeah, it really comes down to the community you have and how passionate they are about your product.
I'm gonna switch gears. I'm gonna throw this out there, an idea to build on top of dub.co. So this is free for everyone out there in the audience. It's coming from my head. So basically, I worked in PR for a long time, and I have a lot of journalist contacts, especially tech media and business media. So my idea would be, I'm gonna call this Medially. I actually emailed the guy about the domain, media.ly, and he wants like 15K US, which is
Not
I don't know,
bad.
but not bad, not bad. And basically, it would be a short URL for journalists, so they could put this in their bio, and if they want like stories pitched to them, then they could click on that link, and then we could build out some sort of backend. So that's my potential side project built on Dab.
I love that. I love that. That's something that we're actually trying to improve, and empower more. I've been working with a few like a few programmatic API users on Dub, and one of the cool things that we're basically going to add like whenever you create a link on Dub, instead of you having to like store that link ID in your database, we basically allow you, when you create a link, to pass like a user ID from your database. So you basically do lookups based on the users from your database, and it will be a much better like developer experience if you were to build on top.
Yeah.
So it's a really cool idea, and considering the fact that you don't have to worry about the whole analytics infrastructure, because that part took us like a good part of 6 months, upwards to a year to figure out. So I think, yeah, great idea. I love that.
Yeah. Just again, switching tracks. So go back to the Bay Area. Like, there's a lot of argument right now about, AI enabling like small teams of people to build huge companies. I saw Midjourney were doing, I think, 200 million of revenue with like 50 employees. What's your perspective on this as you kind of build a company, like in person versus remote, or big team versus small team? Like where are you at with that?
Yeah, I'm definitely remote and small teams. So I think there's a big value in running a remote company because, one, you don't need to limit your talent to a specific geographic locations. Like I'm based in San Francisco, I don't need to only hire from San Francisco. So I think that's definitely a big advantage. Especially there's like so much talent outside of the Bay Area too. So I think that's one, and also small teams is definitely a big thing for me. Kind of a juxtaposition there. But I think small teams it's really impressive how much you can accomplish with just a team of five, really like 10x engineers. And that's sort of what I've seen myself when I was at Vercel. Like as we scaled, there were like pockets of teams that are like 3 to 4 engineers that basically drove a huge portion of like the stuff that we were shipping. A good example was like the AI team at Vercel that launched V0, the AI SDK. I got to work with them briefly, like when we first launched all these products, and it was a very tiny team. Not sure if I can share the actual numbers, but it's super small. It was like a super small team. So I think there's a lot of like value in small teams, and that's what sort of the company that I'm trying to build with Dub. And obviously there are all these tools like ChatGPT, or recently there's this company called product called Devin.ai, launched by this company called Nation Labs. I haven't tried it out. I'm still trying to get into the beta, but I think obviously with the proliferation of all these really cool AI tools, you are able to increase your productivity and allow engineers to operate at a scale that they haven't been able to do before. So small teams, communication wise, it's also great because you don't have to have a team stand up every single day to get people on the same page. So yeah, definitely a lot of benefits there.
Yeah, I think it's the way forward. Like you gotta, if you're not using these tools, then you're losing, you're missing out.
100%.
Jake is a big automation guy. He's doing a lot of automation work on the social media as well.
Yeah, not to contradict everything that just went before. I mean, my opinion, just keeping silent for a moment there, is that it is a bit, it's dependent on the domain of which I think that big teams and small teams are either effective or ineffective. Mm-hmm. And I also think it's a management issue as well, such as how big the core team that runs the broader organization or the larger teams is as well. So I'm a big fan of the small teams for the management, but I think as well, like especially if you've got cross-functional teams and agile structures that you can scale appropriately, mm-hmm. I don't think that management of large teams is too bad. I think one of the things that's driving small teams, particularly in areas like San Francisco, is also the cost of employing such large teams. Whereas if you're out here in somewhere like Thailand, this is not a plug for my latest product, but it could be. Mm-hmm. Then you can afford to hire 3 or 4 people for the price of one person in a parallel position if you're hiring talent in a market like Malaysia or mm-hmm. in Vietnam or in Thailand. Though I have heard actually that the cost of labor is rapidly increasing in Vietnam as well. So I just wanted to add my little point there, that I think small teams great, especially at management level. Get the war room together, get few people in there as possible. But for bigger teams and different kinds of tasks, maybe outside of software, I still think that efficient setups can run large teams. I think a lot of organizations that have like bloated employee bases, definitely there's a reason why there's a lot of headcount being cut. And that's not just because AI is taking people's jobs, but it's that top performers utilizing AI leave people that are, lying flat or not necessarily pulling their weight within an organization standing. So that's my perspective anyway. Sorry if we've gone off on detour. Alex, we're into the future projections round.
But just one quick one, on that, Jake. You are a fan of in person, right? And I respect that as well.
I'm a big fan of in person as well. That's another point there. Sorry, Stephen. I've spent a lot of time traveling in the last 2 years, and I found that for the first 18 months, it wasn't too much of an issue. But when you're trying to structure teams that run as an organized unit below the management, it can be quite difficult to manage if your team is completely virtual or remote, or even your management team is completely virtual and remote. So in the last couple of months, I've really had like a paradigm shift back to, okay, we need to establish an office here with everybody that's working in this office in this one physical location. I don't mind if you come to the office only 2 days of the week, but a minimum, we have to be in the same place.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. I think there's definitely, it works for different use cases. Like for us, like we're building a tech company, we're super small, super lean. It makes sense to be remote. But I can imagine as you start growing, like when it comes to like, like the upwards of 50 people or up to like the Dunbar's number of 150 people, it's important to establish satellite office, not satellite office, but just like a headquarters in like major cities. I think that's definitely what Vercel did really well, and I think it was a lot of joy to be able to come into the office and have built some sort of camaraderie, especially when it comes to the leadership team. In San Francisco, we had one office there in New York, and then last I heard we were starting one in Berlin. So that was really cool. I think there's definitely a lot of value in person too, and when you're remote, it's also extra effort that you need to put into bringing a team together, whether it's through offsites or like weekly celebrations of what people have built. I think there's a lot of these things that you need to be very intentional about. Obviously, trade-offs. So yeah, I completely agree with what you said, Jake.
Yeah, and you're right as well. Like once the culture's set, like it's very difficult to change, right? You saw Apple, like when they asked everyone to come back, there was this huge like outcry because they're all used to remote. So I think it's really critical, especially at this stage, to like set like all these things you mentioned, like get that kind of in place, so everyone knows. To be fair to Notion, I did see a video the other day. It was the interview of the two founders, and they said like we have 3 office days. It's very clear. It's intentional. Like we want this for creativity and team building, and that's our culture. The wording was very Notion like. It was very like kind of softly, but underneath you can see there's like a clear commitment to this kind of like approach. So yeah
100%. That's great. I think that's what they're doing well. I think Notion is known to have a really good office culture as well. They don't have like cubicles. It's all very like super open space, and that's sort of the thing that also drives creativity. And I think what they're doing, I think I also watched the same episode that you're talking about. It's the Notion blog or something. I don't know. Like they have this episode series. It's super cool. But yeah, totally.
I mean, it's hard to build the culture without, we're humans in the end of the day. We haven't got to the level of VR headsets where we're interacting with each other inside cyberspace yet. But I think that being together, there's those cues, those, eye movement, facial expression, all of these little things that make us human play a big part in building culture. You want to know that who the people are around you. I haven't heard anybody yet use the term a remote working culture. or how to build a remote working culture. Maybe that's something that will start to become more frequently used. Maybe this is a new terminology that is yet to really kick off, but I think that there definitely needs to be a base. And working in the past as well, remotely, the people who were in the team that were in a physical location at one time have a different kind of way and understanding of the situation, the context, because they have an understanding of the people of which they're working with. When we used to bring new people into the team, when we had gone remote, it was very difficult to get the people up to speed or feel part of the team, because we don't know what time they're waking up in the morning. We don't know what time they're going to sleep. We don't see them. There's no come into the office and leave the office. Oh, you're going to the dentist later, or you're going to ballet after you finished work. We just don't know. So I think that that's why it's very difficult to establish culture in a remote situation. So I think we're going to move on to future projections now, but how do you see the future panning out? Do you think you're going to have a hybrid model? Are you going to have a location? What's your culture?
Yeah, definitely a hybrid model. I think that's a very good approach. Like, as we scale and grow, obviously, like for the next year or two before we achieve product market fit, the plan is to keep a team as lean and as efficient as possible. But once we go past that and we start to go into sales and go hard on like marketing, paid ads and stuff like that, that's when I think a hybrid culture would work really well, where we have like a base in San Francisco and New York, and then we fly people out on like maybe every once a year or twice a year to do like offsites, and at the same time, people that are located geographically close to the city, they can come in if they want, like 2 to 3 times a week. I think that's definitely the plan. Obviously, we're still very early on, so I haven't thought that far yet. But this is sort of like where my head's at.
Yeah. The other thing I want to ask Steven is I watched a couple of podcasts recently. Diary of a CEO with the Represent clothing guy, and I also watched Jason Fried from 37 Signals on. He was on Sam Parr's podcast, My First Million, and both of those guys were absolutely adamant that they wanted to keep whole control of their business. Like they didn't want to do the VC route and all this stuff. So where do you sit with that? Like, do you want to grow like a really, really big business and like have a small piece of it, or do you want to have some sort of control?
I think what I really admire when it comes to this debate between VC and like and bootstrapped is a middle ground. Like, there are companies such as Linear that do really well. Like, they basically raised a seed and then a Series A, and then they didn't raise for like another 4 years, and they were already profitable. Have like, I think the term they used was like net cash positive. Basically, they had more money in the bank than they raised, and I think that's something that I admire a lot. I really want to build a business that's not only fast growing but sustainable. I don't want something that grows really fast for like 2 3 years and then we have to like lay off half of a company because we hired too fast and stuff like that. So
Basically ZERP era.
Exactly, ZERP era. It's sort of like PTSD for myself, and I'm sure for many others. So I think that's something that we really want to. It's important. Like, my advice would be like, it's really important for you, if you were to do a venture route, to find VCs that align with your approach of like building a sustainable long-term business, instead of something a VC that just wants you to grow really fast and exit. Because there are so many ways to building a venture-backed business. You don't have to exit really quickly. You could be like cash flow positive and have revenue that justifies the valuation. Eventually, you could IPO, or you could return dividends. And there are so many different ways. Another really cool example is Gumroad and what they do. I think I read his story about like how he turned this venture-backed business into like eventually like dividend sharing, company. And it's like, there are so many approaches nowadays, and people are well aware of that, both from the founder end and the VC end. So yeah, 100%.
Yeah. I'm leaning towards the, scale slowly, take it easy, like don't kind of like someone said, like you can't you can give away equity, but you can't get it back. Like once you've given it away, it's gone, right?
Mhm.
So yeah,
100%. Yeah, totally. Totally.
cool. Jake, do you have any final thoughts before we sign off?
Actually, I had a question a minute ago. So you mentioned as well about you want people to run in an optimum. I am curious, as somebody that struggles with this myself personally, but also it's something that would be passed down through management. How do you think that you can find the balance between running at optimum versus pushing people too hard? Because often in
Mhm.
startups, you want people to work super hard, right? Because you've got to get this
Mhm.
thing off the ground, a level of momentum to reach a certain
Mhm.
velocity to escape. So where do you think the balance is, like when you're employing people, of working them too hard versus achieving and crushing your goals?
Yeah.
That's a hard question. I honestly, we're very early on, and it's probably something I have to figure out and sort of learn through. But sort of my intuition is telling what my intuition is telling me here is that you need to set expectations straight, even during the hiring interviewing process. Basically, what you need to convey is that you're building. It's very early stage startup. There are times you might need to like folks might be required to work weekends, especially when there's like a launch coming up, and work not like crazy long hours like investment banking, but generally harder than just 9 to 5. Maybe sometimes it's like what's the sort of culture that I want to build here is like as long as you get your work done and what you need to do and maybe go like 110%, that's it. I don't care about how many hours you work. It's all about getting what you need done. And I think that's really important. And what we're doing right now is basically every single hire goes through a work trial where we work together on a part-time basis for like 3 to 4 weeks and see how we vibe. And through that time you can already tell like if someone is a hustler or if someone's just doing the bare minimum. And that's super important for you to understand. So going back to your question, Jake, I think it's definitely a very fine line to toe. But at the end of the day, it's all about building a team culture that motivates people to work hard instead of forcing them and pushing them. Uh, you want it to feel like you're running after a boulder down the hill instead of trying to push it up manually. So I think there's definitely it's. I heard this quote recently that's really interesting. It's like instead of if you want to get a man to take off his jacket, instead of like blowing wind really hard on him, you should basically turn up the heat and he will turn it off by itself. So it's like it's all about building the atmosphere environment to incentivize people to work hard instead of pushing them and forcing them to do so. Not sure if that's a very vague answer, but
No, I think
sort
that's
of
a
like
great
where
answer.
what I'm thinking currently.
I think it's a great answer. It's hard, it's very difficult for startup because, especially if you're in the driving seat and you need to push 24/7 work 6 weekends in a row, it's hard then to slip out of that mentality and not breed that sort of culture, that grind mode that you may have to have into your workforce because that might be demoralizing for them, but not necessarily in the driving
Exactly.
seat,
They,
like
they,
you
they
said.
want to do hiking on a Sunday or family time, and we're all here like hunched over a computer, right?
100%. Like something that I realized is that as a founder, no one's gonna work harder than you in your own company. Like obviously, like you're the founder, you own like you have the most ownership, and it's like as a result, you're the one pushing really hard, and you have to understand and come to terms that no one's gonna work as hard. And while it's important to set a good example, it's also you have to be realistic in terms of like getting people to work weekends and not spend time with family. So there's definitely a balance there. And I think a good way for like, especially venture backed startups, is giving equity. That's definitely incentivizes people to a certain extent. But also at the same time, like I said, it's all about the environment and the culture that you're building to, incentivize people to strive for excellency. So
Man, this has been awesome. Like, I think we should do this in a year's time. Like, I'm sure like a lot's going to change. Um,
100%.
really rooting for you guys. I think you've got a great product, and yeah, you're a really smart guy. And we've been in Asia now for best part of 10 years, so we're part of the
Wow.
Asia crew. We support Asia, so
That's amazing.
yeah.
So if you're in
Cool.
Bangkok,
Thanks.
if you want to
Yeah,
come to
that's it.
Thailand for the first time, hit me up.
Yeah, Jake's the guy in Thailand.
I need to. I'll let you know when I'm there.
Yeah, please.
All right. Thanks,
Great.
guys. Signing off. Cheers.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
It was great. Thank you.